Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I'm doing something a little bit different this time. I thought I'd have a sit down chat with you guys about the pros and cons of going to fashion school, and then I've got a big list of resources for you guys to use if you're interested in learning more about fashion design from home. So the reason I decided to make this video today is because I had this girl reach out to me on Instagram asking me if she needed to go to fashion school to become a fashion designer. Now, this is a really hard question to answer because obviously there's so many factors involved. So that's why I thought I would put together this video telling you what I think are the pros and cons of going to fashion school in my experience, so that you guys can decide for yourself if this is something that you've been questioning, whether you should go to fashion college or fashion school or just learn some things from home. Then this might help you make a decision. So I've got a lot of things to cover in this video. It's probably going to be a long one. And then at the end of the video, I've got a big long list of websites, videos, documentaries and books that if you don't want to do a fashion degree or you can't afford it for whatever reason, you can do some learning from home. So to start off, I just want to talk about where I went to college and why I wanted to do a fashion design degree. I went to a college called Raffles. The campus used to be in North Sydney, and then after I was there for about 18 months, the whole campus moved to a building in Parramatta, and my college has actually since closed down, but that's another whole story. So unfortunately, my college doesn't exist anymore, so I can't recommend it to anyone. But for the time I was there, it was a really great place to be, and I had a lot of opportunities by going there, and I'm still really close with a bunch of people that I met at that college. I did find my time at college quite demanding and stressful at times, but I really applied myself. I ended up graduating with a high distinction, and I got my Bachelor in Design, majoring in fashion. So I'm really proud of what I accomplished while I was at college. I also wanted to mention the reasons that I decided to go to college to learn about fashion design. For me, I really did want to get a bachelor degree. So really for me, there was no other way other than going and doing a college course or a uni course. The other reason I wanted to go to a college and get an actual fashion degree was because I knew that I would be taught everything I needed to know to work in the industry or to run my own business. And then the last reason that I personally wanted to get a fashion degree was because I knew it would come with the industry experience that I wanted, and that includes internships and connections with people in the industry. A lot of my teachers at college were part of the industry at some point or were still working in the industry as well as teaching. So yeah, those are all the reasons I wanted to go to college. So I'm fortunate enough that here in Australia, we're offered a few different ways to have our uni degrees, our college degrees paid for, and then pay them back later. If you go to a public uni, we're covered by something called HECS, which is like a student loan without any interest that gets paid back slowly over time. For private colleges, however, like the one I went to, we have fee help, which is very similar, but there is an interest amount applied at the beginning. So it can end up being quite a bit more expensive. I'm pretty sure it's about 25% flat rate gets applied right at the beginning, and then they don't keep adding interest later basically. But long story short, fee help ends up costing you a bit more than HECS, but you don't really have any other options unless you're going to pay out your course in full. So I will talk about the cost of doing a fashion degree later, but I am fortunate that I was able to go to college because we have these loan programs here in Australia. So I wanted to take advantage of that and actually get my fashion degree. Okay, now you know why I decided to study fashion. I just want to go through a short list of pros and cons with you about why you might choose to go and study fashion, or why you might choose instead to just learn from home and learn the things that you want to learn yourself. So my first pro by going to fashion college or fashion school and actually doing a proper course, you are going to learn such a broad range of skills that you might not even realize are part of the fashion industry. Obviously, when you do any kind of degree, there are so many different classes that you do that make up the course. There are things that I knew I was going to be learning at fashion college, like different sewing techniques, the principles of design. But then there are things that I don't think I realized I would be learning so much about, like sustainability in fashion and learning how to use Adobe Suite, graphic design, like things like that that kind of all become part of the fashion degree. There's going to be a lot of things that you might not have even thought of that are going to be taught to you in a fashion degree. My second pro is the chance to intern with designers and fashion companies. Of course, without doing a fashion degree, you probably could still intern, but the thing is, most places will require you to have some kind of insurance because you're not going to be covered by their workers' insurance or anything like that, because you're basically a volunteer. And they don't want to be paying extra to have you come in and do work for them. So you do need to have your own insurance. By going and doing a fashion degree, often the school that you're at will have that insurance so that you can intern. Interning for me was so invaluable. I got to intern at Romance Was Born, which was just amazing. I love that brand. They're an amazing Australian fashion brand. They work with artists. They do these amazing collaborations, and they're just generally nice people. So I interned with them for about 3 months, just 1 day a week. I actually had to do that as part of my course. I had to do 200 hours of interning. And while it actually was hard work and sometimes I was doing really tedious jobs, I look back on that time really fondly, and I'm really glad that I got to experience that. Just seeing what it was like in their fashion house, you know, like just seeing the back end of things and how they did their day-to-day life has really helped me figure out how to run my fashion business. And besides, Anna and Luke are just really nice people, and I have run into them in Sydney and they've still recognized me even though they get so many different people interning with them, but they're just really lovely. I would highly, highly recommend that you intern if you can, whether it's through a college or somehow on your own if you can do it. Try and get in contact with your favorite brands, but if you can't get in with them, just intern anywhere that you can. It's honestly the best experience. Even if you're not always doing like the most fun tasks, you really just need to take it all on board and absorb everything you can and just feel like you're part of that industry. It's a really cool feeling, honestly. Your college will also help you make those connections and set up those internships. And speaking of connections, that brings me to my third pro, which is the connections that you will make when you're at college. The friendships, the connections to industry professionals, like your teachers. There's just so many people that you will meet when you're at college. I had people doing photography degrees, and I have since collaborated with those photographers to work on a fashion shoot. There's all kinds of connections that you can make when you're part of a college or part of a school. I've been paired with mentors, I've met artists and models and all these different people that are now just part of my contacts should I ever need to collaborate with them or need to ask for advice. So like I said, unfortunately my college doesn't exist anymore, but I am still in contact with a lot of people that I met there and people that worked there and people that I just met because I was part of that course. And then there was also opportunities that I was able to be part of because I was part of that college, and that included showing at Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week twice as part of the alumni group show. So that was 2 amazing experiences. I was also able to go and show a collection at China Graduate Fashion Week, which I never would have been able to do without college. I have a whole video of that experience. If you want to go watch it, you can click that somewhere around here. I've met different people that have put me in contact with other people, which has ended up in me having really awesome people wearing my clothes. Like that time Dami Im wore one of my dresses. Oh my god. I don't know how I would have done these things without going to college. Of course there probably are ways that you could, but going to college just meant that I met all these people, and yeah, I wouldn't trade that. That was one of the most important things I got from college. The fourth pro of going and doing a fashion degree is getting an actual bachelor degree. So obviously for some people it's going to be very important to get that degree, whether that's because your job that you're wanting is asking that you must have that to get that job, or whether it's just because that's something you personally want. That was what I was like. I just personally wanted to have the degree and be able to accomplish that. That was like a goal of mine, so that was important to me. But if you are looking at getting a job that isn't asking for that, of course, this won't be as important to you. And then my last pro number 5, is just that you will be pushed out of your comfort zone. So I know you can study a lot of things from home at the moment, especially, but going to fashion school will definitely push you further than you probably would push yourself from studying at home. And whether that's just because you're competing with your peers or because you're being asked to put on full-on fashion shows that you probably wouldn't do on your own, there's definitely an element of being pushed out of your comfort zone that I don't think is as easy to do when you're just you studying at home on your own terms. Okay, that's all the pros. Now I'm going to talk about the cons of going to fashion school. The first one's probably the most obvious, and that's simply that fashion degrees are expensive. I know I mentioned earlier that I got fee help to help pay for my course, but that I will have to pay off later in life. So from memory, my course was 60 grand. It's very expensive. That's a lot for a course. That was mostly because it's a private college as well. And then with fee help that I mentioned, the interest that they apply at the beginning, I'm pretty sure it's 25%. So they added $15,000 to my loan to bring it up to $75,000. So it's a very expensive degree. I would have to say the biggest con is just how expensive the degree is in the first place. But that brings me to the second con, and that is not only is the course expensive straight up, it's also expensive while you're doing it, because there are so many things you have to pay for that you might not realize before you get into it. So of course you've got textbooks like any degree does, but as you go along in your fashion design course, you will start being asked to produce collections. I was asked to do, I think, a 3-look collection and then a 5-look collection for my graduate collection. These were both in my 3rd year of college. To produce a collection can end up costing you so much money, especially if you really want to express yourself and you don't want to be held back by a low budget. So not only do you have to pay for your fabrics, you might have to pay for some sewing to be done by seamstresses. And then when you put on your fashion show at the end of the year, you might be asked to pay for models, for hair and makeup, for photo shoots. It all adds up. So just be prepared if you are going to do a fashion course. There's not only the cost of the course, there's going to be costs later on when you start producing collections. From my experience, it was in the thousands, and you want to be saving up some money for this because you do want to be able to put everything into those collections. Trust me, you don't want to regret holding back because you didn't save up enough money to actually do that part of your course. The third con for going to fashion college is it will take up a lot of your time. I'm going to briefly tell you about how when I was in fashion college and I was working at the same time, I was working in a childcare job, which I'm still working in now at part-time, but I could only work there Monday to Friday because it's a before and after school care. And my college gave me a schedule one term that was for 5 days a week that I had to be there, which meant I couldn't work any of the shifts that I normally would at my childcare job, which then meant I had to move back in with my family, which was even further away from college than I already was. So long story short, I had to be at college 5 days a week, and I had to be on a train several hours a day every day to get there. On top of that, I was having to go home and do assignments, and there was so many hours put in. I can't even tell you how many hours I spent at college when I was doing my graduate collection. There was some nights when my friends and I were there working really late into the night, and we got caught once because we weren't supposed to be there as late as we were, and we got into a lot of trouble, which was so annoying because we were literally just trying to do our work. But anyway, just know you are going to have to dedicate a lot of your time if you want to do this course right. And speaking of spending all those extra hours at college, my fourth con of a fashion degree is simply that it is hard work and it is stressful. I mentioned earlier how you'll be competing with your peers. This is true. It can be very competitive at fashion college, but I don't know if that's such a bad thing because it is really good to be pushed to do your best work. However, it does take a huge toll on your stress levels, and it can be really bad for your mental health. I know that I got pretty burnt out when I was at college. If you can make it through, then it is worth it. I will say that while I was at fashion college, several people dropped out of the degree before finishing. I think a good third of my class dropped out before they finished the course. And that was some to do with how hard the work was and how stressful it was, and some of it was to do with money. So you do need to be prepared. A fashion degree isn't for everyone, and it is a lot of hard work, and you need to be very dedicated. Okay, I've got the pros and cons out of the way. I do just want to say I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to go to fashion college. I'm grateful that my country has this fee help system that meant I could go, because I would not have been able to afford to pay for that straight up. So in saying all that, obviously there's a lot of reasons why someone might not be able to do a fashion design degree. Whether that's for financial reasons, or you've got kids that you need to look after, or perhaps you have some kind of disability that stops you having the energy levels to be able to commit to a course like this. Whatever reason, I totally understand. And that's why I wanted to put together this video, because there are a lot of ways you can learn about fashion design without actually having to do a course. Besides, with COVID keeping a lot of us at home at the moment, maybe fashion design is just something you'd like to learn more about, that you're just interested in as a hobby. Whatever your reason is, whether you want to be able to do a fashion degree but you can't, or you just simply want to learn a few skills that are part of a fashion degree, I've put together this list of resources for you guys. I really hope you can find something in here that's helpful. There are books and things that I used while I was in college, and then there's other things that have just helped me while I've been running my fashion business, documentaries, tutorials, all kinds of stuff. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you the full list in this video, but I'm also going to write up a written list that you'll be able to find on my blog, and I will link that down below. There'll also be links in there for where you can go and buy the books yourself. Don't forget to check your local library. A lot of places will have some of these books already. I know this video is probably going to end up being quite long, so I'm going to break my list of resources down into categories that are kind of like the classes I was taking on at college, so that you can kind of understand what the different classes were like when I was there anyway, and then what material we would use to study from. So the first section I'm going to cover is just basic fashion design principles. And I've really only got one resource in this category because it's such a big resource. This is a book that was basically a textbook for my first 2 years at college. It may have even been for my 3rd year, I just can't remember. The book is called Fashion Design by Sue Jenkins-Jones. The copy I have is the 3rd edition. It gets revised often because it basically is a fashion school's textbook. And it covers everything from the basic principles of design. It covers a little bit of illustration. It talks about like pattern making, but it kind of just broadly covers a lot of different elements of fashion design, what it's like to work in the industry, things like that. So it's a really good starting resource. If you can't afford anything else, I would get this book. And it's even got assignments and things in the back that you could do yourself without having to go to fashion college. I think a lot of my assignments at college were even just photocopied straight out of this book. We used a lot of the pages as source material when I was studying there, so definitely have a look at this book. The second class I'm going to talk about is sewing class. So you can get your hands on any kind of sewing guide. I have a few. I have one that's called Dressmaking, and I have the Reader's Digest Sewing and Knitting book, which was actually my nana's, but there's lots of different books you could go to for this. Just any general sewing, how to sew books. You want like quite a thick one because there'll be lots of different techniques and things that you'll need to learn. I would get one of these books, and if you've never used a sewing machine or you've never done any hand sewing, go through the book and try all the different techniques. When I was at college, we made little samples of everything, and that was how we practiced getting good at our seams, doing different like decorative techniques and things like that. I'll recommend a few different books that you could get for sewing down below. Of course, there's also plenty of YouTube tutorials, there's Skillshare classes, there's all sorts of ways that you can learn to sew, but having a book means you're going to be covering a lot of different techniques. The third class that I'm going to talk about is pattern making. There is one main book that I used for pattern making all through college, and I still use it to this day, and that is Pattern Making for Fashion Design by Helen Joseph Armstrong. Again, this is kind of like a textbook for pattern making at fashion colleges, and the version I have is the 5th edition. It actually came with a CD, which had some digital files that I think I used, but my computer now doesn't have a disk drive, but it does have a lot of resources. It's got everything you would need to know about how to draft your own patterns and then how to grade them, which means how to make them into different sizes. So that is a really good place to start with learning to make your own patterns, especially commercial patterns. Now, again, this book is quite expensive. I can't remember how much I paid, but I think it was probably about $100. But it's a lot cheaper than a fashion degree, and I would highly recommend, if you are wanting to learn how to construct your own garments, this is a really good resource to have. Then I have these 4 other books. 3 of them are from the same collection. They are Pattern Magic 1, 2, and Pattern Magic for Stretch Fabric. These 3 books are by a Japanese fashion professor named Tomoko Nakamichi. And if you have a look through these books, they kind of have really wacky pattern designs, but once you learn how to do these techniques, they can be such cool elements that you add to your designs. These books teach you how to add shape or make your garments into really strange shapes and how to make them hold those shapes. So if you're looking for something a bit more advanced than just normal pattern making, I would definitely pick up one of these Pattern Magic books. They're really fun to just experiment with too. And then the last book I have in this category is a book called Drape Drape. I actually have the second one, so mine's called Drape Drape 2. It's in the same style as the Pattern Magic books, but it's more about how to drape fabric than doing different seams and things like that. So this is a really good one to look at if you're interested in doing a lot of stretch fabric. It teaches you how to make things like a bat wing sleeve. So again, if you're just looking to extend your knowledge on pattern making, this is another good book that I have as well. The next class I'm going to talk about is fabric textile class, and also things that can be applied on top of fabric, so like decorative. So I'm just going to call this textiles class, but basically when I did a class on this, I actually did a few different classes on this. I'm kind of smushing them together, but I did a class where we learned all about the types of fabrics you can use and how to choose the right fabric for your pieces. One book that I had that was an important resource was this textile directory. This book is called The Fashion Designer's Textile Directory. It's by Gail Bohr. I hope I'm saying that right. But it's basically just a categorized list of different types of fabrics and their makeup, and it teaches you a lot about how different fabrics work and why you would use different fabrics for different things. And it's a really good place to start. But what I would recommend you do, and what I did at college, is start building your own textile directory. So you want to get familiar with different fibers and how they move and what they feel like on the body. So I actually put together as an assignment a folder that had different fabric samples I'd collected from different suppliers, their content, their price, the wash instructions, things like that. So you want to start getting yourself familiar with different kinds of fabrics so you can start making the right choices for your garments. Aside from that, this book will also just teach you what different fabrics are called. You might not realize the specific names of different fabrics, and this is going to help you learn that. The next book I have in this class is called The Art of Manipulating Fabric, and it is by Colette Wolfe. This is one of my favorite reference books when it comes to choosing different finishes for garments or different decorative techniques. This book is full of different things that you can sew. It's got really cool ideas that you might not think of about how to manipulate fabric to have different surface textures or so that it flows off the body in a different way. I would highly recommend this book to anyone that's interested in creating designs that are really unique. Plus, it just also teaches you techniques that you will keep for life and skills that once you learn, you'll be able to apply them wherever you like. The next book I have in this category is called Couture Techniques by Claire Schaefer. So this book is going to be important if you are interested in making couture pieces. It's got everything you need to know about how garments are produced in haute couture houses, the hand sewing and all the intricate details that go into those garments, because they are in a whole other category than just your ready-to-wear commercial pieces. So if that's something you're interested in doing wedding dresses or one-off pieces, ball gowns, things like that, this is a really good resource to have as well. And the last thing I want to talk about in this category is I would recommend picking up any book on beading, embroidery, any kind of surface details that you want to learn more about that's specific to you. It could be fabric dyeing, I am going to make another whole video talking about the resources I use when I do my natural dyeing, but I'll save that for another video because that's another whole area. You will have things that are more specific to you and what your design taste is. I did a lot of beading and handwork in my collections. I did weaving and embroidery and all sorts. So those books were important to me. I would definitely look at books like that too. So the fifth class I'm going to talk about is I studied a fashion and sustainability class while I was at college. It's becoming something that's mandatory now as part of a fashion degree, which is really good. It's really important to understand about fashion and sustainability, because if you didn't know, the fashion industry is one of the highest contributors to pollution out of all the industries in the world. So when we are designing, we need to consider how we can make our practices as sustainable as we can. So I'm going to talk about a few resources you can look at just so that you can be as informed as you can about sustainability in the fashion industry. The first one is go and listen to anything by Claire Press. She's a writer, she's the editor-at-large for Vogue. So Claire Press has a number of books that you could read on sustainability and fashion and ethics in fashion. I'm going to leave a list of her books in this list that I'm creating. She also has a podcast called Wardrobe Crisis, which I would recommend listening to as well. Then there are several documentaries you could watch to inform yourself about fashion and sustainability as well. I would recommend True Cost and River Blue to get you started. And then I would just recommend Googling as much as you can about sustainability in fashion, because this is a really important issue that we need to be more aware of, especially if we're going to be starting fashion businesses. Apart from Claire Press's books, I really only have one book on fashion and sustainability, and I think that's just because the information is changing so quickly. It's a lot easier to just get our information online. But the book I have is called Textile Visionaries. It's by Bradley Quinn, and it's just a book of new innovations that designers and scientists are coming up with that are great alternatives to non-sustainable textiles. And it's kind of uplifting because it's good to know that people are working on these things and it's not all just bad news for the fashion industry. So I would recommend having a look at that book. It's not a necessity, but it's good to just have a look at where we're going in the future of fashion and sustainability. The next class I'm going to talk about is fashion history. It's really important to be able to have a look at where we've come from in terms of fashion design, and it's also just cool to be able to reference it. There's probably going to be specific eras that appeal to you and your design process more than others. So I would recommend just choosing the eras that you like the most, whether that is in fashion or just in art in general, and picking up those books and using them as inspiration. The books that I have a general history book that was recommended to me by college, and that is a big Smithsonian book called Fashion: The Definitive History of Costume and Style. So this book doesn't go into too much detail. It is just a brief overview of a lot of different eras, but it does start from prehistoric times all the way up to the 80s in my version anyway. Maybe there's a period that you don't actually know when it was, and you can have a look at this book and figure out when that era was, or you might just want to take references from a really long time ago, or have a look at different kind of textiles and how they were used around the world and things like that. So it's always good to have some kind of understanding of fashion history, and then when you find those eras that you like, you can then dive further into them with other books specifically on those times. For example, when I was at college and I was doing my graduate collection, I had a lot of references from the 1920s and Art Deco. But I also picked up a few books when I was doing other collections, like I have a Pop to Popism book about pop art. I also picked up a book on men's style from the 60s to the 70s called Day of the Peacock, which just appealed to me because it was something different and it was some style that I thought I could apply to some work that I was doing at the time. So go crazy with your references. It's really cool to look at fashion history and be inspired by different times. I do have one more book in this category. It was actually gifted to me, and it's called World Dress: Fashion in Detail. It's from the Victoria and Albert Museum. That was just another cool reference book. Sometimes it's just cool to flick through and just get a little bit of inspiration from these books. Those are some that I have that I can personally recommend, but I would just pick what appeals to you the most. The next class we're going to talk about is probably my favorite class, one of my favorites at least, and that is fashion illustration. So there are two elements that are really important in fashion illustration. There's your regular fashion illustration, which you've probably seen before, which is the really beautiful looking drawings of a really tall woman or man in the garments. But there's also trade sketching that you need to learn, and that is the more practical, more technical drawings of what a garment will look like. And these are sketches that you will need to give to pattern makers if you need them to make these garments for you, or manufacturers. So it's important to learn that too. So I'm just going to briefly talk about trade sketching first, and then I'm going to tell you all the books that I have for fashion illustration. Trade sketches are also sometimes called specs or flats, and there is a bit of information about this in the Fashion Design by Sue Jenkins-Jones book that I mentioned at the beginning. But if you want to dive a bit further into how you should be sketching garments for manufacturers and things like that, another good book I have is called the Fashion Source book. And it is just pages of illustrations of almost every kind of garment you could think of. And it's just a basic starting point to show you what a flat sketch of a garment should look like if you're going to be sending that to a manufacturer or a pattern maker. Okay, now let's talk about fashion illustration. I have so many books on this topic because I just really love it. There was one particular book that was really important for college, and it basically covers everything you need to know for proper fashion illustration in the industry, and that is 9 Heads by Nancy Riegelman. Again, this book is like a textbook for fashion illustration. It covers everything from why you need to draw a fashion illustration taller than just a normal body, and how to do that, and it covers in detail every different part of the human figure. It's just a really good book to work through. You can actually work through it like its own course if you want to get really good at fashion illustration. Again, this is an expensive book. I'm pretty sure, again, it was like a $100 book, but I would highly, highly, highly recommend this book if you are interested in fashion illustration. It's got all kinds of techniques for texture, for how to draw different kinds of fabrics, how to draw different clothing, all that kind of stuff. I would definitely recommend this book if you want to do proper fashion illustration. My personal favorite fashion illustration book though is Fashion Illustration by Anna Kipper. This book is just really inspiring to flick through because she seems to just use really cool textures and things in her illustrations, and I was just very inspired by this book. I think I got it before I even started fashion college, and it just made me want to create artworks that were fashion illustrations. So definitely pick up this book if you need some inspiration, if you're interested in doing fashion illustration as an art form, but also to help you express your ideas when you are designing. I also have another fashion illustration book called Essential Fashion Illustration. I can't find an author, but it's published by Rockport, and it was originally a Spanish book and it's been translated into English. I'll add that to my list too, although I don't reference it that much, but it is always good to have different perspectives and different artists that you're getting inspired by when you're learning fashion illustration. And speaking of inspiration, I have one more book in this category that I absolutely love, and it's actually just like an art book with lots of different famous fashion illustrators and their artworks in the book, and I just use this book as inspiration or when I'm trying to figure out my style in my fashion illustrations, and that is called Masters of Illustration by David Downton. David Downton is a huge fashion illustrator. He's very well known in the industry, and he's put together this book with other artists, and it's just really nice to flick through and have a look. I'm sure you'll recognize a lot of the illustrators in this book. If you can get your hands on this, I would recommend this book. However, unlike the others, this book isn't necessary. It's just a really cool art book to have. The other two classes I wanted to talk about were marketing and fashion business. However, I don't really have any books that I can recommend on these things at the moment. I'm hoping that in the future I'm going to find some resources for these categories, and I will probably make a video on those in the future. But if you keep an eye on my list, I might add some resources that you can use, maybe just some websites or some classes on learning to market your fashion business and how to run an actual fashion business. The other thing with this is it changes so often that it's something I will need to keep updating. So I will try and keep you guys as informed as I can on these two subjects, but you'll just have to watch this space, and hopefully I'll be able to bring you something on these two topics very soon. Just as a bonus before I wrap up, I want to recommend that if you are studying fashion on your own terms, you're not doing a course, you're just wanting to get really involved in fashion design by yourself, I would recommend go to art galleries, immerse yourself in the creative world, just get really inspired. Research your favorite designers and find out how they got to where they are, how did they get started. There's plenty of memoirs and documentaries on really famous designers that you could be reading and watching to learn where to take your next step. And again, not all of those designers went to college either, so it is possible to become a fashion designer without actually getting a degree. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, if you ever have the chance to intern, take it, because it will be so valuable to your learning and to your experience. Okay guys, I know that was a really long one today, but thank you so much for watching to the end. I hope that you found something helpful in this video. If I have left something out, I will try and add it to the list that I'm writing up for you guys. So be sure to check there, and if I have left something out that you're really interested in, please leave a comment letting me know. Otherwise, please leave a comment with a fashion design related emoji. I'd love to see what you come up with there. And of course, if you did find this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I'll see you later.